19 after the hour on Cam and Company. Thanks again for tuning into the program tonight. Cam Edwards, your host. Mystery guests on the way. I have no idea. With Cameron Gray, you never know. This could be a Cam Edwards, This Is Your Life. I could have an ex-girlfriend walk through the door in the next 30 seconds. I'm a little nervous, actually. Cameron has given me absolutely no clue as to who is coming here. So I'll apologize in advance if the segment doesn't go well. But I'm hoping it will. Cameron is a trained professional. He knows what he's doing. I hear the door opening. All right. Who's coming in? It's Nikki Gozer and John Lott. Fantastic. Hey, guys. How are you? Thanks for coming on the program tonight. It's good to see you, too. Go ahead. Have a seat. Wow. This is good. Okay, much better than my ex-girlfriend showing up. This is much better.
She showed up last time?
Well, I said with Cameron Gray not giving me any idea who was coming here tonight. Cameron is a devious guy, so it really could have been anybody. So it's great to see you all. Thank you both for coming on the program this evening. How are y'all doing?
Great.
Yeah?
Really great, yeah.
What now? And Nikki, you live in Tennessee. What are you doing here in D.C.?
I actually flew in to start work on content and editing my new book.
Really?
Yeah, I just finished the manuscript, and John Lott is helping me with the content of the book and everything, so I'm really excited about that.
Oh, wow. Now, is this going to be your story?
Yes.
Wow. That's got to be, for those who don't know, and if you're a regular, you should know who Nikki is. But, Nikki, let's talk about your story a little bit. It was a little bit more than a year ago that you lost your husband, Ben.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on April the 2nd, 2009, my husband was murdered right in front of me by a man who had been stalking me. And this took place in a restaurant that serves alcohol where my husband and I were running a karaoke show. And I'm a right to carry permit holder, but at the time, Tennessee state law did not permit right to carry permit holders to protect themselves in establishments that serve alcohol. I had to leave my gun locked in the car, but the man who tracked us down and killed Ben, he was carrying a gun illegally and brought that gun in, and the law did absolutely nothing to stop him, but it did stop me because I'm a law-abiding citizen, so... Yeah.
John, when you hear about these stories, I mean, you've been doing the research for a number of years, and I love the research that you do. But there is something to be said for actually talking to somebody who has been affected in the worst way imaginable by being told this is a quote-unquote gun-free zone.
Yeah, I mean... I guess before I started doing my research, I never thought that I would end up talking to people who have been in these gun-free zones. I don't know how many dozens of people I've talked to over the years that have been in these types of situations, but you know, the feelings of utter helplessness that people have when these attacks occur is just overwhelming. And you know, we were just talking about this at dinner tonight. I don't know, it just seems, you know, I guess particularly with the data, it just seems so obvious to me that when you go and you try to create these safe areas. Mm-hmm. The problem is who's most likely to obey the laws. And we've seen this time after time, not just in terms of something the size of a restaurant. We've seen it in something like Washington, D.C. or Chicago. I can't find any place around the world that's banned guns that's seen murder rates gone down. And you would think there'd at least be something that they could go and point to.
Yeah.
But, you know, we know in Washington, D.C., I think people kind of basically understand that when we banned guns here, it was the good law-abiding citizen, somebody like Nikki, who obeyed the law, turned in their guns, and not the criminals. And rather than making it more difficult for the criminals to go and commit crimes, is what the intent was. I'm sure that's what their intent was. It actually made it easier for them to do that. You know, the other amazing thing that's gotten so little attention is what's happened in the reverse now that the ban has been struck down. And I think in D.C., even more importantly, the fact that the Supreme Court struck down the gun lock law, so people are now able to legally use guns for self-defense.
Yeah.
And in the 2 years after the ban was struck down, murder rates in D.C. have fallen by 36%. 36%. I mean, could you imagine what the news media would be saying if murder rates had gone up by 36% afterwards? Chicago. No, we only have data for 6 months now for Chicago. But in the first 6 months of this last year, Chicago's murder rate had gone up by a little bit over 5% over what it had been over the same time the previous year. In the last 6 months of this year, it's gone down by 14% relative to what it was the previous year. And, you look at Oak Park, Illinois. I was just reading an article recently that they had a very large drop in violent crime and last year because they were in Chicago were the last two places that had banned guns.
Right.
And, you think at some point that it would matter, these types of cases like this, that it would be talked about and reported. I've debated in the last couple of weeks after the Tucson case, I've debated Paul Helmke a few times on TV, and I'll keep on pointing this out, and he'll say, well, we don't support bans. But the thing, and obviously we know what they supported, what positions they took in the Supreme Court cases on these things. And if a ban came up in some place, I'm sure they would defend the ban. But the point is that the same issues that arise in a ban, because ban is often kind of the simplest example of a gun control law, apply in other things, whether it's a small gun-free zone, such as what Nikki's talking about, or whether you're talking about banning particular types of guns. And,
Is the problem simply that you're putting the onus on the people who aren't the people who are causing problems, who are breaking the laws, who are committing these crimes? Because
I'm sure it makes it more difficult for both groups a little bit to have guns, but I think it particularly affects, it's just not the fact that you make it a little bit more difficult for criminals. The question is, are you disarming law-abiding citizens?
Given that most of us aren't criminals, the vast majority of us are never going to be criminals,
right.
To say, well, everybody gets treated equally here, the law-abiding are effectively penalized. The criminal has already told us they're willing to operate outside the boundaries of the law.
Right.
So they're already engaging in illegal acts, and frankly, in the case of Washington D.C., passing a law that banned guns and was it a $500 fine or a 6-month jail sentence, that would have been enough for somebody who wanted to keep the record clean to say, well, I won't be a gun owner. But the guy who's been in and out of prison since the age of 14, he's not going to care.
Right. We're talking about this again at dinner. You take something like Virginia Tech, where somebody who has a concealed handgun permit can carry it virtually any place in Virginia. They can't carry it on university property. If you're a professor or you're a student, if you're a professor and you get caught, even though you can legally carry it to every other place, if you accidentally carry it on there and you get caught, you're going to get fired. And having a firearms-related violation as a reason for getting fired from academic institutions can mean your academic career is over. That's a major penalty for them. For a student who gets expelled for doing the same thing, again, even though they can carry it legally any place else in the state, if they make a mistake and they get expelled for a firearms-related violation, what do you think the chances of getting into another university to try to continue your academic career? You're going to basically, if you're an undergraduate who gets expelled, you're going to have to basically accept the fact that you're not going to have a bachelor's degree. You're not going to get an undergraduate degree. Their lives are going to be unalterably changed. But for this killer in Virginia Tech who killed 32 people, who's going to be facing 32 life sentences or 32 death penalties, even assuming he lived, and most of the time that these guys commit crimes, so these penalties that we talk about imposing after are kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
The notion that somebody facing 32 death sentences, that the penalty for him that's going to be important is the threat of expulsion, it's just absurd.
Yeah.
It's just not even, you wonder what kind of goes through people's minds when they think that the marginal penalty, the penalty that's going to make the difference, somehow it's all right for him to tell his parents that he's facing 32 death penalties, but he couldn't face them to tell them that he'd gotten expelled from school.
Yeah.
It's just not the same real penalty for somebody like that it is for a law-abiding citizen. It's a much bigger real penalty for a law-abiding citizen, and it affects them differently. And you see this in many ways. When a law-abiding citizen carries a concealed handgun, there's a reason why they're so careful when these attacks occur. These people use their guns at only the last resort when they have to, and that is because they have so much at stake.
Yeah.
If they go and make a mistake, if they shoot somebody accidentally, they're responsible. They're going to face penalties as a result of that. They have so much to lose by making those mistakes. A law-abiding citizen does. And so because of those penalties, they're extra careful, maybe even sometimes too careful, but they're not the types of reckless people that seems to be painted so often in the news.
And Nikki, you have spent a lot of time both in Tennessee and in Ohio pushing for restaurant carry. And I think you've been, I have to say, I think you've been an amazing representative of gun owners in your poise and just the grace that you carry yourself with. When you're told that, you're not responsible enough, that society is somehow going to be damaged by you carrying your legally owned firearm with you into a restaurant when you eat, what's your reaction to that?
Well, it's kind of like what John said, those of us who have right to carry permits, number one, we're trained.
Mm-hmm.
But, in that training, we're taught that you are civilly and criminally liable for wherever that bullet goes. And you don't take a shot unless you know that it's a pretty safe shot.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take a shot where I could possibly hit someone. If it comes to that, I'm just not going to pull my gun. I think the majority of right to carry permit holders are very responsible people. And, I don't know what else to say other than we're responsible and we've been trained.
Yeah. Do me a favor, if you would. Just move that microphone a little bit closer to you
okay.
so we can hear you a little bit better. So, John, when you see these laws that, again, are designed more or less or are going to have more of an impact on the law-abiding, I've heard people talk. I think even one of the anti-gun researchers came out this week and said, I think we're focusing in the wrong place when we talk about these bans. Instead, we should go focus in another area. Is there another area, you think, or is the whole concept of trying to reduce criminal behavior by going after and restricting what law-abiding citizens can do, the legal process, is that just a dead end?
Yeah. Well, I'll get to that in a second, but I just want to say one thing about Nikki's. With Nikki or Susanna Hupp, they really make it real for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I can go and give numbers and examples and try to give logic, but it really has to be married with the type of real-world examples that they live with. And, there are other real-world examples, where you have these attacks that are stopped, and those all fit together here. But, answering your question, I wish there was a magic bullet that we could just go and use to keep criminals from going and getting guns. I assume there are going to be two things that are going to be going on right now, because it appears pretty clear that President Obama is going to be having a major gun control speech coming up within the next couple of weeks. He's already done lots of things behind the scenes that haven't gotten the attention that they probably deserve. But the two things are pretty clear. One is there's going to be types of bans, despite whatever the person you were referring to was saying.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to assuredly going to push for a ban on magazine size. And the other thing that they're probably going to do is they're probably going to try to change the rules on background checks to make them more stringent, cover more groups of people. Background checks, it's probably a good thing that we tried, because you'd like to think that something like background checks would work in stopping bad people from going and getting guns.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that the only people that they're stopping, basically, are law-abiding citizens. You go, often the Brady campaign or other gun control groups will say, look, the Brady Act has stopped over 1.8 million people from buying guns. There have been initial denials, they'll point out. The thing is, though, you have to realize that over 99.9% of those initial denials were false positives. It's kind of like when Ted Kennedy tried to fly on a plane and his name was on a no-fly list. A couple times he ran into trouble and was not able to fly. Well,
it's a TSA could say, we prevented somebody from getting on board this plane.
It's kind of an initial denial of flight that's there. Now, he eventually got on, but he's still listed as an initial denial there. It would be definitely in the case of guns. But the thing is, you take the numbers for 2008, for example, the last numbers we have detailed information on. They had 79,000 people that were initially denied being able to purchase a gun. The Justice Department, looking into those, basically argued that there was 143 cases, I think, where they thought that there was evidence that the person had violated the law in terms of falsely filling out the forms that they had used to do the check. Of those, the prosecutors decided to go forward with prosecutions on 102 cases. Of those 102, they had 43 convictions.
Wow.
And if you look at those 43 convictions, they're not career criminals going and getting guns. Many of those cases are people who, one case would be a 65-year-old man whose wife was being threatened. He tried to go and buy her a gun. He had a misdemeanor domestic violence conviction from 40 years earlier where he had gotten into a fist fight with his brother on their front yard. And the police had arrested him, and he pleaded guilty to the misdemeanor there.
40 years ago.
40 years ago. And so you have a situation where this guy just didn't know that it was a covered offense. He just thought, I got into a fight with my brother.
Right.
I didn't realize that this was something that was going to deny me being able to go and buy guns. And a lot of the cases are like that. So, the point is that criminals aren't going there. You're not having the insane, that we've already adjudicated for insanity going and buying guns and getting them there. What we're having is this cost of this 99.9+% that are being falsely stopped from buying a gun. Now, maybe in most of those cases it doesn't matter that somebody got delayed from buying a gun. Maybe it doesn't matter in a lot of cases when somebody's delayed from taking a flight and maybe have to take a later flight. But you do have cases where, let's say, somebody's being stalked or threatened, and they want to try to go and get a gun quickly, and they find that they're on this no-buy list that's there. Being delayed for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks as you go through the process in order to try to clear things and figure out what's there. Because we take two types of errors. We can either kind of let bad people on, or we can make it so tough that we end up catching anybody that could possibly be somebody that should be barred. And we've tried to make it so that we catch almost everybody. But in the process, we're getting all these people inconvenienced and delayed who really should be able to go and buy guns.
Yeah.
And it's a cost not just in terms of things like, normal background checks, but they'll say, for example, 93% or so of the background checks are taken care of almost instantly, which basically means within 3 days. And then the vast majority are done very quickly. And then they'll say all but 2% are going to be done, in about 3 days or more. And the problem is that that 2% or that 7%, those people who are being falsely stopped or delayed from being able to go and buy a gun. So that's not even the false positive issue there. Those are just delays in getting the checks taken care of. Those people also, they may have had a good, important reason for getting a gun quickly. They may have been victims of crime. So I have often argued in the past that I don't mind background checks, if it just makes people feel safer, but they have to realize it's more placebo. But I guess the more I thought about it and the more I've looked into this, the more I think somebody really needs to do even more serious research that's been done to try to measure what the cost might be of these types of checks. And I don't know of any academic study by criminologists or economists that's looked at this that's found that these types of background checks have reduced any type of crime rate.
When we come back to the program, because we have to take a break, can you guys stay with us for another segment?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, because I want to talk more about the study. I feel like we're sitting here with the heart and the brains of the Second Amendment arguments. Because John, you've done such fantastic work compiling the data. And Nikki, your story just touches everybody who hears it. So I want to keep the conversation going here. We'll hear from you as well when we get back at 1-866-NRA News, 866-672-6397, talkbacks at NRAnews.com. We've got more with Dr. John Lott and Nicole Gozer coming up next on Cam and Company. .43 after the hour here on Cam and Company. Elmo in Ohio says to tell Nikki hi. There can be only one Elmo in Ohio, right?
Elmo! I know Elmo. Elmo is a sweetheart. Yeah, he was at the Second Amendment rally in Ohio.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he's great.
Fantastic. Well, we're talking with Nicole Gozer and Dr. John Lott. And
I think he just melted Elmo's radio.
Elmo. He's happy now. It's a good Friday. John, we've seen this week the New York Times story. I'm sure you saw this. Basically alleging that the NRA hates science because the NRA has prevented the CDC from doing these politically motivated gun control studies. Right. We had John Fraser, the NRA ILA Director of Research and Information, on talking about this. Are you concerned about this at all, that we're now seeing this sort of media push for not just, as you said, academic studies where there may be a need for additional research, but this sort of slanted kind of study?
I don't think the government should fund any research.
Really?
I don't, because I've just seen too many times it's impossible for politicians or their appointees to divorce political considerations from who they go and give money to. Mm-hmm. And it's just impossible. You know, they have incentives, they care about things, and they know who they're giving the money to, and they know information about the track record of people that they're giving money to. And there's just no reason why research, who gets research, should be dependent upon what types of political findings they have or views. I never got any government money for the research that I've done. I've done the largest studies been done on crime. You know, if I can do that, now maybe that means they might have to agree to co-author something with a graduate student who they're going to have spending hundreds of hours putting data together. But, you know, that's life. Or they can go and pay for it some other way out of their own pocket. But I've done lots of data studies over time, lots of large data sets, much more data and much more work than any of the stuff I see being put out by public health people. I mean, the public health people stuff, I kind of wonder. I look at these data sets. I said, did they put this together in an afternoon? I mean, you look at the stuff that David Hemingway looks at up at Harvard. He has like 50 observations. He'll control for a few variables. You know, it's stuff that you could put together literally in an afternoon. I mean, by contrast to my stuff, I'll look at all the data that's available. I don't know how to pick 1 year of data.
Right.
You know, what year do you pick? And you know, they'll just control for a few factors that are there. And it's not done. Like when I try to do a paper, I'm not going to say that I know what variables have to be accounted for that can affect crime. Mm-hmm. Lots of people believe different things. I try to put in everything that somebody else thinks could be relevant. But I also don't just pick certain time periods of data because, you know, you have these studies that look at like 34 counties in 1 year. I mean, we have 3,140 counties. How do you pick 34? What's the rule? Should it have been 35?
Right.
Maybe it should have been 32. But, you know,
and these counties are going to look very differently. I mean, how do you know which 34 to pick to get a representative sample?
Well, they're not trying. I mean, there's no, you know, it's just, you know, you got all the data there. There's no excuse not to get it all. So you have these studies. They get all this money. They do these very small studies that, as I say, you could collect the data in an afternoon if they wanted to do often for these things. And I just don't see why the government's giving them hundreds of thousands of dollars for doing this. I remember one time when the National Academies of Sciences was doing on their guns and violence report, I was talking to one of the people who was providing them with the money, one of the government agency heads. And I was trying to figure, what do they spend the money on? They're spending $1 million on this. And they said, well, you know, to bring the people together, hotels, things like that. We have a few meetings. It's going to maybe run a total of maybe about $125,000 to do that. I said, well, okay. That still leaves $875,000 that are there. And they said, well, you know, you got some staff to help them out. and they got their time and research, and they're going to be producing a book at the end. I say, you pay me $50,000, and I'll put you together a book. You're not going to, or $100,000 or $200,000. I'd be very happy to put together a book for $200,000. I don't know why you have to go and pay these guys the rest of the money, and they're not even doing a lot with the data. They take data that other people put together. The big time cost for putting these studies together is the months and years spending putting the data together if you're doing a comprehensive data set. So they're taking data that other people put together, running the regressions, hiring some research assistants to work through the National Academy to go and do, reanalyze the data that's there. And it's just a real boondoggle. And who gets on those committees is often political.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you one example. James Q. Wilson dissented from the National Academy's report on guns and violence. Wilson is considered probably the preeminent criminologist in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim was telling me, he said, he'd been on like 4 of these panels before. And basically he said, I can't agree to the conclusions that you have in this. And people are saying, well, you won't be invited back to another panel. So it's kind of like they give you a lot of money, and they say, you agree with everybody else here, you come to unanimous, or we're not going to invite you back. And Jim's thing was, look, he's almost 80. He's had prostate cancer. He's not going to be around forever. He doesn't really care about being on another one of these panels again in the future. So the fact that they're threatening him with not being able to go and get more money and be on another panel in the future, he just didn't care. And so he just did what he thought was right. But a lot of other people, even the ones that may have been kind of moderate or something to begin with, there's just no reason why the government should be involved in determining what science is. They have all these academics out there already working for universities, many of them public, most of them public. They're already getting their salaries paid by the taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no reason why a social scientist. Now, if I have somebody who wants to build a big accelerator for smashing atoms together,
right,
I can understand why you might have something with that. But when you're talking about somebody who's just putting together some crime data that's already there but collecting it, who's going to be running regressions on his laptop or on his desktop computer, there's just no reason that the government, the CDC, or anybody else should be determining who should get this money and who shouldn't. Should just cut the taxes and let people keep their own money rather than doing this. Because all it is just, I've just seen it too many times, that politics just can't be divorced from who they go and give the money to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And whether it's, even if it was a Republican or a Democrat, the thing is, Republicans are not very bright often on these things. So what they do is, you look at the Bush administration, he appointed a Democrat to be head of the National Institute of Justice during his first term. He appointed a Democrat to be head of the Bureau of Justice Statistics. I don't know what the thinking was there, but they didn't really use it to produce much to favor themselves. I mean, there's lots of things you could have done. I mean, I could have given you 10 hours of ideas on things that I would think would have been useful to look at. I mean, just one thing the Bureau of Justice Statistics does, it goes and puts together lists of top 10 crime guns each year.
Okay.
Why not a list every year of top 10 guns used defensively by people? Just to kind of balance things off in the discussion. Both seem relevant. If one's relevant, the other one should be relevant too. And but they wouldn't do that. But the Democrats, they're pretty smart. They go and they put well-trained academics who agree with them into these positions, and they produce all sorts of garbage studies that at least kind of help push their views that are there. And I don't think the government should be doing research on this stuff either, because just for the same political biases, they can produce some data, but let other people go and look at it.
We're talking with Dr. John Lott, the author of More Guns, Less Crime, recently out in a third edition. Also, Nicole Gozer is with us. And Nicole, we got about 3 minutes left here. I don't know if anybody has ever asked you this question or not, but you've been interviewed by a lot of mainstream media reporters, and I think you've always done a very good job of
Great job.
Presenting your story and presenting the views of gun owners. We often see, in fact, earlier this week, or maybe it was late last week, we saw Mayor Bloomberg have an event at New York City. There were, I think, 34 victims or family members of victims of gun violence, is how he described it. You obviously had a very devastating experience from a bad guy with a gun. Why did you not become a gun control advocate?
Well, common sense.
Was there ever a point, I mean, as you were grieving, as you were angry and just
Never.
furious about what had happened? No?
Never, ever, ever did I ever blame the gun. Never, no. A gun cannot pull its own trigger. I know many, many good people that own guns, and that gun has never, ever been used to murder anyone. I never blamed the gun, ever. I realized that this has to change, Susanna Hupp, this almost the same scenario, eerily, happened to her back in 1991, and, the same kind of situation happened to me, and it's amazing how long she has been talking about this.
Yeah.
But yet people still are not getting it. And now it's happened to me, 18, some odd years later. And I'm just trying to do whatever I can to trying to educate people the same as she has,
Well, you're doing an amazing job, Nicole, and I'm so glad that you and Dr. Lott could come on the program tonight. Unfortunately, we're going to hear music in our ears in about 6 seconds, and that means we've got a hard break coming up. But again, great seeing you in studio tonight. Cameron, you did a good job. This was a good surprise.
Thanks, Cameron.
Thanks, Cam.
And again, Dr. John Lott, More Guns, Less Crime. The third edition is out now. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program tonight. Nikki, look forward to seeing both of you again very soon. We'll be back with Hour 2 of Cam and Company here right after this on NRAnews.com and Sirius XM Patriot.